Sbragia Winery in Gyroscope at the end of Dry Creek Road. My man Andrew here has been kind enough to import some fantastic wines for me in the tasting room. Why don't you talk a little bit more about what you do for the winery, Andrew?
Sure. Well, yeah, my name's Andrew Pimentel. I do sales up in the tasting room. I also manage all of our online marketing for the winery. So I'm doing our social media, our website, etc. And giving folks full tours here. So here we are in the cellar, among the tanks, full swing and harvest. But luckily we have a little lull here to really check things out.
I came here to check out some pump overs and punch downs, and what do I get? I get a slow day. I get a guy playing with his Facebook outside by the tank. But what's the total allocation of wine each year?
Sure. So we're a small family winery up here in Dry Creek. We make a little under 10,000 cases annually, obviously depending on the growing season.
And this has been a really nice weather year for the grapes. What have been your notes as far as the clusters you're seeing, the yield? What's your overall take so far halfway through the season?
Yeah, we're about 70% through crush. As of now, I mean, all the fruit looks phenomenal. It's been another one of those staple years for sure. Nice, long, consistent growing season. Like you said, we get a nice long hang time. We should have some nice complexity out of the berries. Everything looks real big and ripe. We should have some great flavor profiles. We're still waiting on a few cabs from Napa, Mount Meter, Powell Mountain. They should be in by the end of this week.
You know, some of the wines I tasted upstairs could all be really defined by the word balance. Talk about what you know about what Ed does with the wine that gives the Chardonnay that perfect balance of oakiness and freshness. That second Chardonnay you poured me, I believe it was the Gamble Vineyard.
Gamble Ranch.
I would never have guessed that was full French oak, full malolactic, and it was still so bright and crispy. Talk about the balance that Ed puts into these wines.
I think that's definitely something that sets us apart is the balance in its entire portfolio. You mentioned the Chardonnays. I think one key characteristic is that both of our Chardonnay vineyards are home ranch here in Dry Creek, and the Gamble Ranch down in South Napa, which is the old Barringer Private Reserve vineyard. We're both just outside of traditional Chardonnay growing appellations. You won't find a lot of Dry Creek Chardonnays. Typically, it's a little warm here in our valley, but our home ranch is down at the south end of the valley, adjacent to the Russian River. So about 10, 15 degrees cooler than the rest of the valley. I think that one, the coolness is going to allow us to retain that acidity, definitely a key element to the Chardonnays. But also the fact that it does get a little warmer in the afternoon gives us a nice, big, bright fruit profile as well. His use of all French oak definitely keeps the oak influence pretty subtle. And then the Gamble Range Chardonnay, we actually ferment and age in all new French oak barrels. But surprisingly, it's not an oaky Chardonnay.
It's not at all.
I wouldn't classify it as buttery either, although it does have those components. To be honest, I don't know what Ed's secret is. Balance, though, is definitely a key component.
It's one of those things that will die wondering, and I'm hoping to get some more footage here. But hey, if I don't right now, Andrew, I really want to thank you.
Thank you very much for coming down, Mark.
Cheers. Mark Milton, Andrew Palomino, what's your last name? Pimentel. Andrew Pimentel here at Sbragia Vineyards in Gyroscope, California. Mark Milton for Inside Juice. Thank you so much.
Sure. Oh yeah, well this is Petite Verdot. We just inoculated this yesterday, got it in the day before. There's about 9/10 of a ton in here. And it's already going house of fire. And we went from, we dropped 4 bricks overnight. And I'm assuming it's going to go another couple before we're done today.
Generally speaking, just like while we're here, talk about what a PunchDown does as far as moving the process from juice to wine.
Well, basically, when we inoculate, we're actually adding the yeast and that starts the fermentation process. 2 things are happening. Of course, the yeast is eating sugar, drinking alcohol, but one of the big products is CO2. And that's what ends up floating the cap. And what we have to do is submerge that cap again, get it all wet again for a couple of reasons. One, we're trying to extract colors, we're trying to extract some of the taste compounds, phenols, all those things that you associate with tasting a glass of wine. A lot of them are in the skins, and so we agitate the skins on a regular basis. But the other thing we want to do is make sure the skins stay wet. If they start to dry out, they start to mold. And mold's not going to ruin the wine, but it can actually sometimes add some awful flavors.
Talk about the level of tannins that come from this and how much is generally added artificially to a wine. Because
we don't add any tannins whatsoever to our wines. What we're doing is we're trying to extract as much as we can from the skins. There's going to be even more. You'll notice every once in a while you see some stems in here. Stems actually have a whole lot of tannin in them. We try not to break the seeds. Again, that's a lot of tannin right there. If you've ever had a table grape, and you've actually bit down on the seed, and you got that real astringent flavor, or the astringent action in your mouth where it dries out, that's the tannin that's in the seeds, and there's a lot more of it in the seeds than there is in the skins.
Does it look to you, is that just me, or is that thing like already? It already seems to have its flight path. That's a trip. But that thing is like following a line. That I'm going totally insane. Rolling.
This is the last of the Godspeed cap.
Oh wow, nice. And that's how mountain as well?
No, Mount Veeder.
So talk about the action and talk about your philosophy about the eroding the cap and what your kind of mindset is when you're doing this to the juice.
Well, basically, like I said, we're trying to get the cap wet, and one of the, when we do pump overs, we're trying to submerge the cap. Come on. Right now I'm taking the sugar levels just to make sure I don't have a little operation I got to do on these this afternoon.
Little surgery?
No, not surgery so much as, oh, you're close. When we get about 2/3 of the way through fermentation, we like to add a little bit of yeast and yeast food just to give it that last oomph. With a really high alcohol tolerant yeast, the stuff that we're going to be using is like tolerant up to 18%. The problem with fermentation is that as the yeast makes alcohol, it toxifies its own environment and starts to kill itself. And so it's a race to make sure you have enough yeast to ferment enough sugars before the alcohol takes over and kills the yeast.
And that generally gets to be about 14% alcohol content
Depends
in there?
on what your sugar was at the very beginning, yeah. Generally the conversion is probably around 0.62.
Smart man told me it was 5/8.
5/8, yes, that's about 625 right there.
About 65.
Yeah, so you take the sugar level at the very beginning, which we measure in bricks.
Right.
And so generally we try to harvest reds at about 26, some of the whites between 22 and 24. And you multiply that by 5/8, you're going to get a rough idea of what the potential alcohol level might be.
Okay. Okay.
And at 26, you're talking about 14 or thereabouts. Basically with the cap, what we're trying to do is wet all of the berries and keep them wet enough so that they don't form mold, but also the agitation releases those compounds that make wines taste the way that they do. This is during this process is where you're actually going to pick up a lot of the terroir for the grape, right, because the soil and everything else is in the skin. And when we agitate it, we release that sort of stuff. We start to break up the skin.
And talk about the premium fruit that you use. Howell Mountain, Mount Veeder, Dry Creek Valley. Andrew had said prior, the grapes speak for itself.
Oh, sure, yeah.
How much of a premium do you put on getting that fruit that's going to speak for itself?
Mount Veeder is a great growing place for Cab, for one thing. That's what Napa Valley is known for, is Cabernet Sauvignon. Mount Veeder, you're talking about mountain fruit. Mountain fruit's a little bit finickier, it's a little bit harder to grow. The more you stress the vines, generally the idea is the better the final product is going to be, because the vines spend all of their time concentrating on making its babies, its seeds, and the grapes that encase them. As opposed to making more leaves and more vines and things like that. So when you reduce the amount of water that they get, or you put them in rocky soil that drains very quickly, you're stressing the vines a lot.
Now, are you talking about how the vines go down into the soil seeking the water table, and then along the way making a lot of inroads to all the nutrients in the soil?
Oh, sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just like any root system for any plant. You know, it's looking for water, it's looking for nutrients, and
when you're in volcanic soils or really rocky soils, for one thing, there's not enough dirt. There's not as much dirt as there would be, say, in a really nice, loamy sort of bottomland.
Right.
And hence, no nutrients. And then the water drains off really fast. And so the vines go very deep to find a water table, but when you're on a mountainside, the water table's even deeper. And I don't think the grapes can actually get there. I mean, they're going to grab what they can get. I've heard that a lot of places will try to, in terms of grape yield at harvest, 5 tons was a great rule of thumb per acre, but in some mountain cabs, you're only going to get 2, maybe 3.